The Competitive Edge podcast is sponsored by our Competitive Edge community, so shout out to all our patrons for your support. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Competitive Edge podcast, where we dive into Pokemon Go PvP content for your Silph Arena tournaments, for the future of whatever Niantic is bringing with their Versus Seeker that we know about. But in today's episode, we are going to get into the Ferocious Cup and kind of dive deep into the choices of Nidoking or Nidoqueen as an option for that anti-charm slash anti-electric, if that makes sense. As I've seen a lot of questions of people asking me, should I get Nidoking? Should I use it? I have a Fury Cutter 1 versus Nidoqueen. And we'll talk about the stats firstly. So Nidoking is very offensively stacked, with just a rounded attack around 130, depending on where your IVs are at. A defense around 105 and stamina around 122. So it's definitely heavy on the offense. Nidoqueen is kind of the opposite, more bulky. It's definitely got a lot more stamina with 142. And then the attack and defense float around the 115 area, give or take. But the big talking point is the fast move. So Nidoking as a legacy is really great because obviously Fury Cutter can charge its charge moves very quickly, and it can just explode opponents when they don't have shields up. But the thing is you run into problems when you need to farm something down with your fast move, which is why Nidoqueen kind of takes the cake here as the pick. So we're going to talk about a specific matchup, and that is going to be Alolan Ninetails. So Nidoqueen both need to shield a Psyshock. It'll do a ton of damage to them. But Nidoqueen has the potential to farm down, while Nidoking has to use a charge move in order to finish it, which is why it's probably not as optimal to go with that, because what you're looking to do is, if, let's say, an Alolan Ninetails gets swapped into your Umbreon, and then you kind of get it down a little bit, then swap out to Nidoqueen, you want to be able to farm that down. Yes, you may have to use a shield, but if you can charge up, 80 to 100 energy with Nidoqueen, you can unload on the next Pokemon, while Nidoking may have to waste all that energy it just gained in order to take it out. And even then, against Alolan Ninetales, Nidoking can't really win because it doesn't have that Poison Jab. Now, you can run it with Poison Jab, but again, it's not as bulky as Nidoqueen. And the reason why we're bringing it, honestly, is to counter two things. It's to wall electric, so Minun, Raichu, things of that nature, because we can resist it with our ground typing, and then we want to be able to delete charm users because of our Poison Jab. So that's just the toss-up on Nidoqueen and why I think you should go for that. Now, that doesn't mean don't go find a legacy Nidoking, right? That was one of the first things I ever got. If you guys were here for the Twilight Cup, February, so very back at the beginning, I thought Nidoking was going to be a monster, and I searched my community, and I actually have one. So I have a Nidoking ready to go, but just looking at how the flow of these Ferocious Cup battles work, we definitely want to have that Poison Jab, and especially in not only with taking out the charms by farming down with super effective damage, but just neutral matchups. You can kind of chunk down a Minun more with that Poison Jab versus the Fury Cutter. So that's just my take on it when it comes to Nidoking or Nidoqueen. And we're here with the Competitive Edge community. We have quite a few people listening in, so if there's any questions, this is just kind of a short episode, everyone, just getting it out there. Definitely, like I said, go for Nidoqueens, guys. Definitely, it's very easy to trade. First of all, it's not legacy. Let's talk about the movesets. I forgot to mention that. So Nidoqueen, we want Earthquake and Earth Power. The reason for this is Earthquake gives you that extra coverage of that extra damage you may need. So looking in the mirror, if you go Fresh Fight unshielded, a Nidoqueen can't, the Earth Power won't one-shot it, but an Earthquake will. So it's just that extra bit of damage that we want, and there's not enough merit to bring a Stone Edge versus the meta. So we definitely want that Earthquake, Earth Power. So let's see what some of these questions are. Um, Best way for Nidoqueen to play the Umbreon matchup. All right, well, let's pull that up and we'll talk about it. So I'm on PvPoke right now, which if you guys don't know about pvpoke.com, it's an amazing resource for Pokemon Go PvP. This is like the mecca of where everyone comes to find out everything they need to know. So we're going to take a look at a Umbreon with Snarl, Foul Play, and Last Resort. And we're going to go ahead and break down that fight. So Umbreon wins, right? It's going to be spamming Foul Play. Foul Play is going to do even on the damage, so 45 damage, 45 energy. Last Resort, a little less, so it's going to cost 55 energy for 48 damage. So we know there's no going to be shield baiting, which means the Last Resort won't do more, so you don't really need to worry about that. The move is going to be what it is. So looking at this, the breakdown, the zero shield, Umbreon can win in all shielding situations in a fresh fight. So again, it's not with loaded energy, but it's very close, guys. So the zero shield, we have a 576 rating on Umbreon, so it barely wins. 548 in the one shield, and a 724 in the two shield. So again, it goes to the deeper you go into the fight, Umbreon's going to win because it has that bulk. It can spam Foul Play more. Now, if a Nidoqueen has some loaded energy, so let's go ahead and give Nidoqueen, let's say we started at basically 135 energy or 135 HP. We took a little bit of damage on fast moves, but we start with, I don't know, about 20 energy. We got a few poison jabs in. Let's see how this breaks out. Nidoqueen then wins the zero shield, and that's because landing Earthquakes is going to do basically just under 50%, about 40% of Umbreon's health, while Earth Power is going to do about a third. So again, that's where that extra damage comes in. So if you're against an Umbreon towards the end of the fight, if you can visually see that it's within Earthquake range, you can land that and take it out. If you only have Earth Power, it may not be enough because it is only 48 damage. So yeah, when it comes to that, we don't want to stay in long term against an Umbreon. Because Cody's wishing he'd come in, because obviously it's gonna outpace us with Foul Play. So the deeper we go in, we don't want to stay in. We want to utilize Nidoqueen as a closing Pokemon. How I think about it is like Steelix from last Cup. It's got great closing moves with Earthquake and Earth Power. It can hit the meta really, really hard. So maybe if you have a lot of residual energy from farming down a Alolan Ninetails, and then the Umbreon comes in, maybe you go for that Earthquake or Earth Power to try to get a good chunk from Umbreon or get a shield, and then maybe bail out, because we don't want to stay in there. It's not going to be looking good. But again, that's Umbreon in the Ferocious Cup. It is a very good generalist, and it's very close fights against a lot of things. So that's how that breaks down. Another question. Favorable opener for Ferocious Cup. This is coming from Trader Frog. And these are live questions. By the way, everyone listening to this podcast, the Competitive Edge community, we're in a Discord group, and everyone's kind of listening in right now and having questions during the chat room. So, favorable opener for Ferocious Cup. So far, I've been liking Umbreon and Suicune, but interested to hear my thoughts. So, yeah, Nidoqueen, man, Nidoqueen's like, I love it as an opener, and I love it as a closer. So, how I've been kind of testing my lines is making them look favorable to bring a Charm user and an electric type Pokemon against my team. So again, playing with that team of 6 mindset of when people kind of calculate, okay, my Ninetails, Alolan Ninetails does well against 3 out of 4, or my Minun can, beat 4 out of 4 or something like that. I want them to bring that. I lead with the Nidoqueen and hope to catch them in round 1. So Nidoqueen as an opener is fantastic in that situation where your team is kind of geared to let someone think that it is okay to bring an Alolan Ninetails and an electric to the fight. Now on the flip side of that, having it as a closer or as the hard switch, so if we lead with an Umbreon, they switch to Alolan Ninetails, that's when we hard switch into Nidoqueen. Both are very viable options in my testing. Leading with Nidoqueen has been awesome. And it's very punishing if they lead with an electric or Alola Ninetails, because then we can counter whatever they bring in. Next question, Nidoqueen. For players on a budget, this is from Varios. For players on a budget, is double moving Nidoking or Nidoqueen essential? Okay, so I'll go back to the fact that I think Nidoqueen is definitely better than Nidoking because of its ability to farm down and beat Alola Ninetales. As for someone on a budget unlocking the second charge move, it's hard because I would say it is necessary, because there's going to be situations where you want to have Earthquake and you wish you did, or you wish you used it because of that extra 10 HP that it can take out over Earth Power. But if you're really, really struggling, you don't have enough dust, I would opt to say Poison Jab Earthquake as a go-to moveset, because having Earth Power is great. It's, it's a little more cost, a little cheaper. But the thing is it doesn't have that closing potential that Earthquake has. So if you're really up at it and this is your budget cup, I would say go Poison Jab Earthquake as a last resort for that extra damage. So we have another question from El Show D. Jason. I probably said that wrong, but Jason. So go for EQ, take the shield, and let Alola Ninetales farm the rest of Umbreon's HP. Either you win or take the shields or leave him in farmable HP. So it's an interesting situation because every fight is different. But if I have tons of residual energy, I want to look to take advantage in some way, shape, or form. A lot of you have heard me talk about winning in 2 of 3 areas. We want to win either the Pokemon / damage, we want to win the shields, or we want to win the energy. And in any exchange of a fight, we want to win 2 out of the 3. So if we're in a circumstance where we have tons of energy on Nidoqueen, enough that we know we can get to another Earth Power or Earthquake when we come back in after a fast attack or 2, then maybe going for Earth Power or Earthquake would be viable to allow our Alola Ninetales to get a head start, maybe farm down without having to use a shield. So Alola Ninetales against an Umbreon is interesting because Umbreon, if it has energy advantage, can really put a lot of pressure on Alola Ninetales and actually take it out if it doesn't shield. You can't just... It's not a Skarmory versus Venusaur or a Bastiodon versus an Altaria situation. It's not at all. If Umbreon has some energy, especially if it has a last resort already charged by the time the Ninetales comes in, it can beat it because of its ability to spam down. So that's where we want to gain some more advantage by putting out that Earth Power, possibly landing that debuff, taking a chunk of health, bringing in Alola Ninetales to farm down more safely. That way we don't have to invest 2 shields. Maybe we only have to invest 1 or none. A question from Pika Magicella. Do you prefer Legacy Raichu or Minun? So this is gonna... Man, Ferocious Cup is a huge budget tournament. For me, to put into perspective, guys, I'm down to 87,000 dust. So my choices are very, very limited. And I think this is one of those cups where they did a really cool job in creating something unique and fun, but it's putting a dent in everyone's pocket. And it's going to be something that I'm going to use a lot of old stuff for. So in this case, I have a Legacy Raichu. It costs 10,000 to unlock a second charge move. If I'm going to bring that electric, I'm bringing Raichu. Minun is great, but it costs a lot of dust. Now, if you happen to have maybe a lucky one that's already super powered up, you could merit that, but again, it's going to cost more on the unlock Stardust. So yeah, I think in my opinion, I would say prefer Legacy Raichu over Minun for that instance. Now, if you're rolling in the dough and you got tens of millions of Stardust, Minun looks to be somewhat of a better option because of its bulk and the fact that it can soft counter an Umbreon, and it can still spam, right? You still have Discharge and Thunderbolt, so there's a lot of merit to it. But if we're looking at it from a financial standpoint on our Stardust, I think Raichu is better. Or if you happen to have a Lanoon from previous tournaments. I know I had a Lanoon that I was like, I got ready for Worlds just in case because I saw some merit to it, but I ended up not bringing it. So I already had that ready, so I might use Linoon there. Question from Salcido. If your opponent uses Linoon as their anti-water instead of an electric, do you still bring Nidoqueen to counter the Charmer or try to work around that? So, yeah, it's tough because you have to also see what the rest of their team is. Now, Nidoqueen, I'm in such love with Nidoqueen in my testing. Against Linoons, it is harder because it can spam that grass knot. But the thing is if they go for that dig, which first of all isn't stab, I'm gonna go ahead and pull up the battle right here for you guys so we can talk about it more. So Linoon with Shadow Claw, dig, grass knot versus Nidoqueen. Oh, let me take away. I still got the HP set at. Let's go fresh fight here. Okay. All right. So it's interesting because it's who has the energy advantage. The second one has more energy because if we look in fresh fight, 0 shield, 1 shield, they tie. They kill each other at the same time. So that's going to come to charge move priority. And then in the 2 shield, Linoon wins out. And that's because it can get to that grass knot just a bit faster. But again, that's the energy advantage. If we have a Nidoqueen that just farmed an Alolan Ninetails, Linoon's got to watch out for that. Now, if their team, if the only reason I'm bringing a Nidoqueen is to counter Alolan Ninetails on their team, then that may not be the best call. But again, it's up to the line of 6 and how comfortable I feel that I can actually land against the Nidoqueen. Or against the Alolan Ninetales, I should say, with Nidoqueen. So another question, foul play / Dark Pulse on Umbreon or Alolan Raticate. Seems Umbreon is just so dominant that you go with all dark. Yeah, so Umbreon with Last Resort is fantastic and it's great against the mirror, but most of the meta you're going to be using foul play, which is why it's reasonable to bring Dark Pulse as well. Because there's situations where the longer you go into fight, you're going to get to foul plays more often. So let's go ahead and pull up Umbreon here so we can get the actual nitty gritty. So off the bat, foul play, right? 45 energy and Dark Pulse is 50. So because of Snarl's charge rate, you'll get to that Dark Pulse and foul play at the same time on the first go around, but the deeper you go into fights, you'll be able to get to foul play more often, which is why it's more spammy. But then there's situations where Dark Pulse just does that extra bit more damage. That could be a closing move. So, say a Pokemon's at, 35 HP and you go for the foul play and he gets it to 5, but if you would have used Dark Pulse, you could have taken it out, which is why a Dark Pulse foul play Umbreon is still viable, and having Alolan Raticate is still viable as well because you can handle some of the waters. You can also handle Umbreon in the mirror, but you do have to watch out for counter. I think that's like the big thing is I warn, like, if you bring Alolan Raticate, you have to watch out for Donphan or Ursaring because counter will absolutely shred you because it is a dark normal type. Umbreon needs Dark Pulse to beat Minun. Yeah, that's a great example because it has that just extra bit of damage for not that much more energy cost. 5 more energy costs, as we saw right there. It's got that extra umph to finish it. It's a situation of Nidoqueen having Earthquake and Earth Power, but in this case, it's Earthquake and Earth Power will both do super effective damage to a Nidoqueen in the mirror, whereas Umbreon needs that Last Resort to get that advantage in the mirror, if that makes sense, guys. But again, all comes down to energy and where we're at in the fight and everything. So we're gonna answer like 1 or 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap this up. Let's see here. Super new novice player. What are the best matchups that you can just farm down? I heard you say Nido farms, Alolan Ninetails, anything else? So, let's see. Well, we have Alolan Ninetails versus something like a Shelgon. So the reason why Alolan Ninetails is in this cup and so dominant is because of Charm. So we want to utilize Charm's ability to farm down Pokemon that does super effective damage against. So Dark and Dragon. So let's bring up Alolan Ninetails here. I have to spell out Ninetails. Alolan with Charm, Psyshock, and Ice Beam. So let's go against Shelgon with Dragon Breath. All right, so Alolan Ninetails. Okay, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 fast attacks. So 7 taps on your screen, and Alolan Ninetails farms down a Shelgon. But the thing is you have to watch out for Flamethrower. Shelgon does have a Flamethrower in its kit, and it can get to it before you finish it off. So you will need to invest a shield there. But the second you do, you invest a shield and you have full charge. You almost have Psyshock and you almost have Ice Beam. So you'll be good to go when it comes to the next Pokemon coming in. So that's a great farming situation. What's the best electric for this cup? Spammy or tanky? So again, I think best is relative. I would say best in terms of what you can handle Stardust wise. So we talked a little bit earlier. I know you just joined Zorocast. We just talked a little bit earlier about Raichu or Minun. And again, it's going to come down to dust. And if you have it, so I think if you have a Legacy Raichu, it's going to be more cost effective there with Thundershock and the 10,000 Stardust unlock to be able to see a good investment in your dust for that. Minun, on the other hand, is going to be a huge Stardust investment. They both provide the same role of covering the waters. So it can go either way. I think long term, if you have the dust, I think Minun would be a better option because bulk always seems to, in the long term, outweigh the spamminess early on, because of the fact that shields can stop that spamminess where bulk can absorb raw damage without having to use the shield. So yeah, that's going to wrap it up for this one, guys. Thank you all for listening, and I will catch you all in the next one. Take care.